It's time to take a deep breath and quiet the mind. Every breath and thought was energy that brought us to our experience in this moment. We are going to exercise our beliefs in the possible. We will bend and create our own realities. Let's explore how to square our recovery and thrive in life. I welcome you to Recovery Squared Radio with your host, Steve Wofford.
I have Dr. Lindsay Bira, and she is a therapist, speaker, and consultant with me here today. Thank you for being on the show, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me.
So the first time I met her was at a meditation meetup here in San Antonio. And I was really intrigued because I was looking for places to take my kids where we could practice mindfulness. And some of the yoga studios aren't real kid-friendly. And so I was looking for fun ways to incorporate meditation. And so I was checking out meetup groups on meditation, and there was a group that was meeting at the Pearl, which is like a historic converted brewery along the Riverwalk in San Antonio, and it has this industrial retro vintage kind of look to it. And it's a very busy place, and so it's a very neat place to meditate. And so I took the boys down there, and we connected, and it was just an all-around neat experience. And we were talking about, different mindfulness practices and some of the different areas that we kind of both work. And so today I wanted to talk with Lindsay about, mindfulness practices, meditation, and then also overcoming some of those, fear-based thinking and fear-based reactions that we experience just during the course of our lives. I can say for today, for me, I had court this morning, and that whole process has been going on about a year and a half, and it's not a process that I'm particularly fond of, and there's a lot of hurt feelings, emotions, energy, and just it's not a great place to go if you've ever gone to court. And so, but I remember sitting there going, my gosh, I want to just meditate and feel better, but my heart feels like it's literally going to jump out. And so I just kind of did the best I could, but I was in this situation where it's like I almost couldn't, I was like in fight or flight, and I can control my reaction, but my body's like freaking out. What am I going to do? And so it's kind of funny because the last time we actually talked, it was the first time I spoke on Recovery Squared the night before, and I thought I was going to die that night. We had the group meditation at night, and like I felt better, but then I went home and went to bed. It was like the whole thing. I had to start over. So meditation works. I get a lot better able to handle things where I'll be affected maybe for hours versus what before I'd be affected for days. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you so much for the work you do with, your community initiatives. I think there needs to be more mindfulness and meditation out there that's more easily accessible.
Yes.
And I know that it's been there, but it'd be kind of nice to be a little bit more easier to do stuff like that and learning how. They're kind of in the nooks and crannies, and luckily it's a little bit more not only accepted today, but practiced a little bit more. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much for having me today, Steve. And I think all of your initiatives that you've been working on are really great with the Recovery Squared. And some of my initiatives with mindfulness align with yours really well, as we've established, in our conversations and meeting up in the group. And you make a good point about there's a need for more mindfulness and meditation in the community. Something that I've seen is a lot of the organizations who promote it or provide space for it or the professionals who lead groups on it approach it from more of maybe a religious perspective, whereas I see the gap for approaching it from the science-based perspective.
Right.
And with my PhD in clinical health psychology, I've learned a lot about how the brain and the body interact together. So something that I'm very passionate about is how we can retrain not only our brain, but also our bodies to react differently. Now, you mentioned your experience today in court where it felt like your heart was going to jump out of your chest. So even though you were aware cognitively about what you wanted to do or needed to do to calm down, it was still that physiological reaction.
Right.
And on a very basic animal level, our heart rate, our breathing, our digestion even is being controlled very automatically within a process that we can't really control immediately. So our sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight reaction system that gets into gear whenever we sense danger or we're in a difficult situation. So that sounds like what you were experiencing. And I think why mindfulness is so powerful and why meditation can bring so many benefits is because we not only get more in tune with how our body might be overreacting or might be overactivated, but we can also learn how to teach it to relax better. And if we do that in times that we're not stressed, we're actually conditioning our body to respond differently.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I remember early on in the process it was much worse. Whereas today I can kind of calm it down, and I have a pretty strong meditation practice, but unfortunately we're still human.
That's right.
and we have to walk through those storms sometimes. But hey, I want all the tools I could have to minimize that damage because I like being able to sleep at night.
Oh,
and I'm able to do that. So whereas, a year or two ago, I'd be messed up for days. So it's real powerful. So what brought you into psychology? What got you to this point, and what was part of your journey that got you here to where you're practicing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, my path has been along the trail of psychology, and there's so much breadth in psychological fields and different specializations that you can have. I began working with kids when I was really young, volunteering in high school with kids who were coming from broken homes. And that made me really realize how much we're shaped by our environment and how that can set us up for the rest of our lives and how we view things. In college, I began volunteering with an acute inpatient population who were actively psychotic and who were inpatient to get stabilized on meds. I became fascinated with how the brain can have a completely different reality based on a slight mix-up of neurotransmitters. So visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, that was the reality. So that's where my real interest in the brain came in. As I went into graduate school and was involved in different research labs, I kind of fell into post-traumatic stress disorder. So specializing in the research and treatment of that disorder. So at that time it was in civilians. Now I work largely within our military and active duty with combat trauma. But I began to realize that specifically with PTSD, and I like to call it, it's almost a hijacking of the nervous system. So the brain was faced with such a threat to its existence that it said, I'm never going to forget this. I have to keep myself alive, and therefore I will remember this moving forward. And that's where it sees triggers in the environment even after that threat is gone, and the nervous system is still reacting to that. So it's almost like a false alarm. So if we go back to what we were talking about, the fight or flight system and the nervous system just reacting very automatically, sometimes that can be healthy. Sometimes we need to be stressed. We need to be scared because it actually moves us away from something that's bad for us. But a lot of the times that's being activated because it's a false alarm. And what I quickly realized through my clinical training was the most evidence-based treatment that we have now is called cognitive behavioral therapy. So really it's many treatments under that umbrella of practice. And what this means is you really focus on the thoughts that people have, so on the cognitions of the mind, and then you also focus largely on their behaviors and what the nervous system is giving them. So one thing that we start off doing is just creating awareness in between the thing that happens, your perception or interpretation of the thing that happens, and then the following physiological reactions, right? So if we're in traffic, somebody slams on our brake in front of us, we have that immediate fear response. So probably the interpretation in between there is, I'm going to be hurt or something really bad is about to happen, right? And so our nervous system gives us that response. We can even have times where we see a friend on the street. We say hi. They don't say hi back. There's many interpretations we could have of that, right?
Right, yeah.
If we say, oh, they're a jerk, we're going to have anger and we're going to really feel that in our body in a much different way than if, oh, they're probably having a really bad day and they just didn't want to talk about it. That would make us feel maybe even empathy, which feels much different in our body. So it's kind of learning about that process of things and learning how to change our perceptions, but then also targeting the nervous system and teaching the body how to relax better. So if we look at things like heart rate, blood pressure, even digestion, those are things that are really linked with that. And just by simply, and we talk about this in the group all the time, is adjusting the breath in a certain way, we can actually change the way the body's responding very immediately. And if we make that a practice, then we're just changing our baseline of response to where we're more relaxed, we're healthier, and when the stressor does happen, we have that tool in our back pocket, and as soon as we start breathing in a different way, our body quickly follows.
I love that. The things that I've been able to do with my breath, it's drug-like. It's very powerful, and so I call it being intimate with my breath. Like I can get so focused into it that I can. And sometimes like when I'm in court, it's a little harder to do because you have people around you and looking at you. And it's just one of those really stressful, but I look at it, I call it my courtroom meditation because it's like, that's when you up your stress level. And when you can be mindful during those times, it's like, okay, well, my heart's going to explode. It kind of just ups the game a little bit because like when I'm meditating at home or next to a river, like it's real easy, right?
Yeah.
To get control of that. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to practice that, I guess, because like you were saying, it's your perception on how things, you can look at things as a negative or a positive. In reality, I'm just going through a process to the life I'm trying to create that I chose to create. Right. And so going through it as a victim, woe is me, and not being able to breathe, it's a very, very painful thing. Mm-hmm. And that's how I started. But it was because of these practices, I was like, there's something here that shouldn't be. Like, it shouldn't be this hard, right? And so like today was just a perfect testament to, the power of like being able to do this. And it's still not easy in those really difficult, stressful situations. Right. But at least I'm not going to feel the same way if I get a traffic ticket, but some people that have PTSD that see something that they see as a threat, and you start reacting different. I think that's kind of the interesting thing. And I think that's where a lot of, addictions come from. There was some sort of trauma and there's thinking that goes along with it. And without that shift in mindset, then you start having all sorts of other problems. Your life spins out of control and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So how do you work with people to say they're kind of like me? Well, I was at that place where I'm like, I really shouldn't, my back shouldn't be all out of whack and muscle spasms and I can't stop thinking. And like that led me to some of these practices, right? Like I found a way, but for someone who might be listening, how would they identify that this might be able to help them? And what are some of the things they can do to find a better way to live?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this stuff is really hard. And something that really stands out for me when I hear you talk about it is the importance of kind of sitting with the human condition. So the stuff of when we do get upset, right? Because we can never fully avoid that. Or, we do have things that happen with our body where it starts to break down or injuries happen, and there's no real escape from that. So it becomes a process of learning about how to accept it and roll with the punches kind of thing. And we aren't programmed to do that. We are programmed to react to things and avoid things. So when we have something like a pain impulse that comes in, we end up reacting to it with resistance and even anger. Now, that chronically, especially if it's chronic pain, is going to impact our mood over time, impact our perceptions of other things. And we know that our mood and muscle tension actually comes back around and reinforces the pain. So I think, we all get into these cycles that sometimes it seems counterintuitive to do the thing that's opposite, but the thing that we're doing is actually reinforcing the problem. So, I would say for anybody to, number one, just try it out. And that's what I put on my website is, what do you need? Just openness to experience and come and check it out. I think also anytime that we can create more awareness into our own personal patterns and how things are connected, that's the best thing that we can do, because then we can start to see what's there and how we can move forward and change it. I think practicing acceptance is one of the hardest things that we're put up against, because we have kind of our animal basic brain fighting against this larger cortex that we've developed that can think about the future and plan. So it really becomes about developing a practice that's going to help you accept your current condition. And it's very easy to reach for things that's a quick fix. That could either be avoidance, right? If there's a situation that just simply stinks, don't want to deal with it, so you can just avoid it. Now that might lock in a different problem, right? Or even substances, right? Sometimes emotions and situations can be so overwhelming that we want that quick fix. That again creates different problems. So it's about plugging in those things that are actually going to train your brain and train your body to begin to respond differently. And, with chronic pain, there's some visualization exercises that you can do where you associate your pain with some pleasant imagery. Now, you're never going to be glad about the pain, and you're never going to want to really welcome it. But it becomes this practice of you can't change it. So how can you almost invite it to be a piece of your existence and give it a different meaning? So the meaning of being alive, having a nervous system that works. And we all know that, it's the yin and the yang. If something has a good side, it also has a bad side. And it's becoming more aware of both of those things, how they balance each other out and how they come to make the whole picture.
I love that. I know today I was thinking I'm just embracing being human and just observing. It's Eckhart Tolle, just observing your thoughts, observing the feelings. And I like to visualize an ocean wave. They're going to pass through me. I grew up surfing, and I never really thought of it as a visualization. It was kind of more the imagery. It's like a passing wave. More are going to come, but it's just that's life. Mm-hmm. It's all just a process. Just let it go, because it's that reinforced vicious circle is we think we're like protecting ourselves, but we're really not. We're just causing a lot of stress that's going to lead to disease and a lot of other bad decisions.
Yes. And it's interesting. One example I always like to bring up of how we act in certain ways that reinforce the problem. So insomnia is a big one. So insomnia, your brain has this natural rhythm, right? Your circadian rhythm, and it dumps different chemicals and different processes at different points in the day. We actually have a lull at the point of the mid-afternoon. So that's why we usually feel a little bit draggy or tired mid-afternoon, because our sleep load is just getting a little bit heavier. Something else kicks in and kind of brings us through the evening, and then we get tired at night. So if that's working properly, then we'll be sleepy at bedtime and we'll go to sleep and sleep the night through. Often, because we have stressors of daily life or something else going on that disrupts our sleep, that can get knocked off a little bit, off its rocker. And what happens then is when we can't go to sleep, we tend to say, well, let me just try harder. Let me lay in bed until I go to sleep. Okay, now let me just relax here in this situation because I need to go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is we end up laying there awake. And what's interesting is the brain then begins to associate the bed with a waking state. So it actually turns off some of the sleep load and we get conditioned to being awake in the bed. So that's where a chronic problem happens and just reinforces itself. And actually the thing that we tell people to do who are having sleep issues is if you can't sleep for about 15 minutes, get out of the bed. Don't even be in there. And don't even sit in your bed doing anything else besides laying down and trying to sleep. Because we want that association to become stronger. The brain responds to stimuli in ways that we have no idea about, just as it does with things like the courtroom, right? Or somebody slamming on your brakes in front of you. It responds very automatically, but sometimes we aren't aware. So just by getting out of bed as soon as you can't sleep and reading a really boring book in a dimly lit room, you don't want it to activate you in any kind of way. But that sleep load begins to become heavier. And then once you get in bed, that association is there. And over time, that becomes stronger and reduces the sleep. Another way to do that is even just increase the barrier between you and your bed. So that's like making your bed every day, throwing on a few extra pillows just to make it very clear that when you get in bed, the sheets are down in that process. It really does help the brain.
That's interesting to say that because a lot of my biohacking that I do, it all started with sleep. Mm-hmm. It was my sleep what affected me when I was in relapse mode. I was tired just about every single time that happened. I would get tired and I couldn't do it. And then, you're not trying hard enough and you can't go to sleep. And then, but that all my, a lot of my wellness came from just wanting to sleep better. Mm-hmm. I changed my diet and I realized that I still couldn't sleep. Supplements, like all these different things. But then I realized it was the toxic marriage that I was in, mm-hmm. and just the stress and the mental and the emotional stuff that I had to. But even after that, I still had to, normalize everything.
Yeah.
But I know that today, I mean, my like 6 hours of sleep every single night, I rock it and it's awesome. So for anyone out there who's listening, there's hope out there, because that's a very painful thing to not sleep, because that causes all sorts of other problems that are your brain works. I'm like almost a different person.
Yeah.
In that consistent tired state. But when you going back to what you were saying, it's kind of like a sleep routine.
Definitely.
Like they say how important morning routines are. All the successful people out there, they talk about their morning routine that sets them up for the day. Same thing for sleep. Like I have my blueberries, and I'm not taking any sleep supplements anymore. But when I was, it was kind of like, I think it was more about the process of going through that. Hey, I'm taking I have my blueberry snacks before I go to bed. I eat berries. And I noticed that I get tired just after eating them. Is it the blueberries making me tired? No, it's my brain saying that Steve's about to get into bed.
Yes.
And it's crazy. It's almost like I took something that says, hey, it's time to go, like I took a sleep aid or something, but it was just some blueberries.
Yeah. And we call that behavioral conditioning. And you can do that yourself, when you kind of understand the concept. But that's exactly what it is. And when we look at like placebo effect, people kind of look poorly on that, but really your brain is just expecting a response from what it's been trained to react with. And along that line too, you can do actions that will train your brain to begin to get ready to respond differently. And then you can actually do some of those relaxation techniques in the bed. So before bedtime, even before you get into bed or while you're laying there trying to go to sleep, to do, they call it 4-7-8 breathing. I like to do 4-4-8 breathing because I think 7 is just a little bit too long. It can be uncomfortable. But where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds. And the key here is to make your out breath twice as long as your in breath. And begin, maybe 2, 1, 5 or something. You just want to start small and then begin to lengthen your breath until you get to that point. And what that does is that makes your nervous system slow down. It makes your heart rate slow down, and it really preps your body to get into that relaxed state.
Yeah, I love that. when I used to do a lot of my breathing exercises right before bed, because that was in a time when like I wanted to sleep as best as I could. And oftentimes I'd have to spend several minutes doing it. I'd practice with my heart math, but now I've gotten so good at it. It's like 2 breaths and I'm out.
Yes.
I
do the
something
same thing.
it's like you can just breathe and release everything. And I'm going to have to try that. Was it the
478 448?
478. I think I do like a 5-10.
Yeah.
I've never held my breath, but I like all the different breathings.
Oh,
They all do a
yeah.
little bit differently, but in the end, it's whatever you stick with. I think
Exactly.
like the most thing.
And I always tell people that whenever I first started the breathing, I thought, what in the world is this doing? You know, we
Right.
learned about it in graduate school, and I was working with a cancer population at that time, so cancer recovery. And, that comes with a lot of anxiety and people going through chemo and managing all those symptoms. And so we were using a lot of the breath. And I would practice it at home and say, well, this isn't helping me. But after a while, when I stuck with it, it became behavioral conditioning. So my body actually learned how to relax better, and I've been using it ever since. And when I go through times of stress, it helps me not only in the moment, if I'm getting anxious, waiting in line when I have a billion other things to do, or going to bed at night when my to-do list is running through my mind and I just can't kind of wind down. I use the breath, and like you said, sometimes it's amazing when I wake up in the morning and think, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I went to sleep.
Yeah, that's crazy. So when I first started breathing, it was like, well, of course I'm breathing, right? I'd die if I wasn't breathing. And it wasn't really until several months into my practice that I really understood it. And I this is just what I've been telling myself. It's time for Steve to get intimate with his breath. It's like when you get to that point where you can get the nuance of it, it's like it just shuts everything else down, and it like connects to your soul in a way. Mm-hmm. Where it's really powerful, and it's almost like narcotic or even stimulating, because I'm doing some breath work using my EM wave that's more of an attention on what you're doing and just a consistent breath to keep your attention and focus.
Yes.
Over the course of an hour. And so you can use it to relax, you can use it to focus, and you can use it in all sorts of different ways. It's almost drug-like.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about what mindfulness is, it's really about staying here and now in the moment. And if you're here and now, you can't be distracted by much from the past or the future. So you become intensely aware, kind of almost hyper-aware of things that are going on around you, maybe inside your head or your different interpretations of things. And it's very powerful. And there's not 1 second of our life that we don't have our breath. No matter what's going on around us, we can always come back to our breath. And that's why a lot of these mindfulness approaches and mindfulness practices incorporate the breath, because it's a key anchor that we can tap into at any time.
I love that. So why don't you tell us briefly a little bit about your business? I know you do the consulting and the therapy and the coaching.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Definitely. So I have my personal business. It's drlindsaybira.com. And through that, I'm a therapist. I have my private practice. I'm a consultant where I meet with organizations in our community to talk more about mindfulness and how to put in programming that helps people with wellness and well-being. And then I'm also a speaker. So I talk to people and organizations about these kinds of things. And on the mindfulness front, you know well that I've been leading the community group here, and that's been going great. It's been almost 2 years that I've been doing that. And I also work with different companies. So right now I'm doing in a local elementary school, I'm training the teachers on how to teach mindfulness in the classroom. So that's been a really cool experience to really take these techniques and apply them to many different age groups of kids, because kids pick up on this stuff very quickly if it's presented in a creative way and you adjust some of the deliveries to where they can use their imagination and really make it tangible instead of so abstract. So I'm working with a local elementary school to do that. I've also given a lot of presentations within big corporations to talk more about how to use this within employee populations. And then another thing that I do is, in addition to my private practice and being a therapist within that, I'm also a coach. So I coach people from anywhere around if they want to get better with mindfulness, if they feel like they're generally healthy, but they just want to improve themselves in some way. Maybe it's stress management, maybe it's relationship issues, maybe it's a career change. I like to weave mindfulness approaches within all the work that I do, because at the very basic level, it's just being aware of how things are affecting us. And at a higher level, it's actually learning how to change your perceptions of things. And like we were talking about, roll with the punches.
I love that. I really am intrigued with the work you're doing with the youth or in the schools, because I mean that's why I first connected with you, because it was something that me and my kids can go do. That I think that's such an important skill that, to me, I'd rather my kids go meditate than the competitive sports, because that's more thinking and doing and competition and scarcity mindset versus abundance and peace and calm.
Yeah, it's so true.
And so we probably should do a whole nother show just on that idea.
I like that. Yeah, you got my wheels turning there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if, through the course of your day, what's one thing that you use to kind of, whatever in life you have to recover from, whether it's a bad day or just life issues that happens, what's one way that you would square your recovery?
I would absolutely go back to the breath on that one. I use that throughout my day multiple times a day, and to go to sleep. It helps a lot. And then also, mindfulness doesn't necessarily have to be a very planned, formal practice. It's great if you're able to do that, but I think it's important for people to understand that mindfulness is almost just a way of being as well. So you can plug that in at any second of your day. So a lot of times while I'm in the middle of running from one location to the next in between patients, right, and limited on time, or if I start thinking about something that happened in the past that I wasn't happy about and replaying that, once I realize that's happening, I say, wait a minute, let me bring it back to right here, right now. What's within my control? What's outside of my control? And what is my goal next? And really fostering the intention of, if something happened before, I can't change it. What is my intention here and now to do well at this task, to move forward in this way? And here I go. So I think those self-check-ins are very huge too. And upon that self-check-in, you can use the breath and practice that.
I love that. I'm right on board with that. That's I like coming up with all driving meditations, courtroom meditations, by the river meditation. There's all kinds of places that I have to do it, and it's life changing. So I want to thank you so much for coming here and sharing your experience and all your knowledge. I love the work that you're doing in the community. I'm benefiting from it. My kids are benefiting from it. That's and great. There's probably all these other people. And, we're going to talk again about, how we can continue to work together, and maybe do some other shows on some of these other topics. Cause there's a whole world out there of exploring to do on this, in psychology and neuroscience and all that stuff. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. And you've really been an inspiration, too, with everything that you're doing with Recovery Squared. It's given me ideas, and you've brought a lot to the group to talk about, and offering your experiences so transparently and openly to people, I think is really powerful. So thank you so much for having me today. This topic is limitless, and I look forward to hearing more from you and possibly collaborating again.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
This show was such a great example of why I started this podcast. Dr. Lindsay is just awesome, and I really appreciate her support. Since this show is about creating content that helps inspire and transforms lives, regardless if you're in a dark place or just want to get to your next level, I put the show notes and links to Dr. Lindsay's website on recoverysquared.com. I'll also put on some other resources like a recent article I wrote on my meditation journey that I think will really help you if you're new to meditation. And while you're there, if you can click on the Access Now button, I will send you some other tools to help you get to your next level using some of the things we talked about on this show. The first thing I'll send you is a free one-on-one coaching call with me. This will not last very long, so act quickly. I also have a framework to send you that illustrates the Recovery Squared belief process. And finally, since we're building a community around Recovery Squared, and when you sign up, we can also add you to a secret Facebook group where you can connect with other tribe members. I want to build relationships. I want to build our tribe. So I invite you to be a part of this community. I love you and so grateful for you listening and supporting Recovery Squared. Thank you for listening to Recovery Squared Radio. Please visit recoverysquared.com for access to resources on squaring your recovery. And as a reminder, act without doing. Create space between your thoughts and actions.